good.
All right. Well, I'm still not done, but come hell or high water, I'm gonna finish it today. I promise you.
All right.
So I'll walk you guys through, and we can get you get an idea for what I've done and how we can start setting up, figuring out what the services or what the settings should be for all the services and setting that up.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to start with a little bit of code. So the idea here is that, or with the settings, is that the device defines what settings it has, and basically informs the relay of that. And then on the front end, we just use that information to build the settings form GUI. So that way, we can have devices that have that might have, well, one device might have a kind of service that and it has certain settings, but another device has the same type of service and it might not have the same settings. For example, like
sure.
If you made a camera without motion detection or something.
Right. Hey, so that's a good point. Because like right now I'm thinking like, how do I, control, like for example, I'm adding IR lights, like IR LEDs to the spotlight, the one that I'm making, right? So the IR LEDs can kind of turn on whenever it's dark outside, right? Well, to me, that's like a light level sensor, right? But it can come from the camera. It can come from the camera. You can take some average of the image, and maybe it's not as good as like my pyro sensor. But let's say I didn't want to add all the pyro, the ESP32 stuff in combination with the Pi all in one. Then I could almost get the light, that. So how I'm thinking about from our current architecture would just be to create a light service, right? And then that light service, no matter if it's a ESP32 or a camera, it's still kind of trying to send that the light level, the lux, but the problem I see with that is the accuracy. So obviously doing it from a camera, doing a sum over the image, that doesn't seem as accurate as using an actual infrared sensor to measure light level from the ambient sun and stuff.
Especially if you don't know like what the camera's like frame rate and exposure are, and so shutter speed and exposure are, and stuff like that.
Right, but you could do some calibration. You could do
sure.
and it could be rudimentary. I mean, it's better than, so right now it's like I have IR LEDs. Do I want them on all the time? Probably not. Probably want them to go off at night. Well, yeah, we can have a scheduler. It can go on time. But then maybe having, detecting a light level would be good too. Even if it's a, from OpenCV kind of thing, it's still, anything that we can, I want to have options, right? So, the same thing is like with the siren. So, I'm adding a siren to this thing, mounting it to the bottom. I could make it go through the ESP32. We already have a kind of a siren service hooked up, semi hooked up. However, I'd like to be able to just make it, the Raspberry Pi siren and having, run that as a node program, right? And so you have these kinds of options and it's flexible. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is having different settings for obviously different devices.
Yeah, this ties into that, because we can have, like a siren on an ESP32 there can be a siren on an ESP32 and a siren on a gateway, and the relay service just works for both of them. It's just the same thing as far as the relay is concerned.
Right.
So we extract that away in the driver on the relay. But from the relay's perspective, other than the drivers, from the relay's perspective, they're the same thing. Mm-hmm. And then, so this is the camera service on the gateway, and it's got this settings, definitions, static property. And And so if you had a siren on an ESP32 and a siren on a Raspberry Pi, but they had different capabilities, you can represent like what settings they have here. So I'd like to replicate this same idea with state. So the device itself tells the relay what, or the service itself tells the relay what state options it has. And I think we'll look at that more when I start building UI for the Automator, because that's where it'll really be necessary to be able to do similar things. So Automator is also something I wanted to bring up.
So with the state, okay, so I'm thinking you would tell it what, different types of state it can be at, right? You have different states, but I'm thinking more of this, like you send out the service. Like right now, currently, what I'm, my next step on my side of the code was to send out the list of services on the load event, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, do you infer from those services the state, or do you need to get? I guess obviously there needs to be a like an actual representation of the current state, but the possibility of what states you can request or are available. Should that come from the service, or I think
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like this is a light service on Relay, and I started out kind of with a real basic idea of this, like defining in a static form, defining what state properties it has. So hour brightness, color, and then a type, Boolean percentage color. So the idea here is that when we make like an Automator action, when I build the UI for the Automator, we can look at this list and just generate the form for this, for a light service based on what state it says it has. So then in the Automator GUI, you can go in and say, when this automation is triggered, I want to set, brightness on this light to whatever, and it'll, that form will render out like a slider to set, the brightness percentage.
Right. Okay. So I guess my question on that is, okay. So I think we were talking about level before. We're using the word level instead of brightness, but I'm thinking. So those have to match with all the hue functions, right, or whatever functions we have on the light service. So if we have like a toggle,
right,
then you would have to add a toggle definition there, correct?
If you had a toggle?
Yeah.
What do you mean by toggle?
So if it's on, switch it off. If off, switch on.
Oh, okay. I see. Well, I think the concept of state is a little bit more like you doesn't map to specific actions like toggle. Just maps to like what's the current state, or what's the current state of the device in its so
okay.
So yeah, we do have to map these to hue lights or whatever the light is.
Right. These aren't definitions of commands. These are definitions.
Right. No. In here, one thing we do have is this setter property, and that's kind of like this is kind of in an intermediary stage. This whole concept of like setting the state definitions. So I expect this to go away. Right. I'm hearing an echo.
Here, I'll mute.
Yeah. I expect this property to just go away, and we won't need to have the services on the relay will actually get really easy to build, because once we do this transition where I kind of what I'm wanting to do is take what I've learned in doing the settings definition and apply that to state. And once we do that transition, we won't need these methods for setting specific state properties. We won't need that at all, which means we don't need.
Okay, so then how do you set the state?
It'll just be in the service superclass. There'll just be a method that sets a state property, and it'll be able to set state for anything, and the logic for to make sure the value is valid and whatever else will just be kind of abstracted to these concepts of different state types. So like a Boolean, percentage, and color. Like to validate a color value, obviously, we're going to make sure that it follows our schema for color, and same for percentage, right? So percentage on the relay is a value from 0 to 1. But I don't want to spend too much time on state. I kind of just wanted to touch on that because, or to point out that a lot of the work that I've done over the last couple of weeks is going to make, it's kind of the underpinnings also for the Automator UI. So when we go to do that, that's going to be a whole lot easier with everything that I needed to put in place for settings. And I'll show you more of what I mean when we get into how the settings actually works. So we have these definitions. This is for the camera service on the gateway. So again, the idea is that the device will tell the relay, hey, these are the settings that this service supports. And I also have this on the device level. So there can be device settings. I think that won't be as common. There might be some devices where you want to have a setting that doesn't really belong to any specific service. It's just kind of for that device overall. So for the camera service, we've got resolution width, resolution height, rotation, and should detect motion. And so these are defined by the gateway camera, or by the gateway, as part of the camera service. This could just as easily be done if we wanted to build a non-gateway camera for some reason, and it would just only include those definitions that for the settings properties that it supports. The counterpart to this is like.
So hey, Ethan, why are those set? So you actually set hard code resolution underscore width. Why not get those dynamically from the gateway? Get those definitions from the camera service. I mean, on the Pi.
Well, that is what happens. What ends up happening. So when the service, let me bring up the service superclass on the gateway. When the service, when the relay gets the service data, it gets this settings definition property, and we serialize that here. This is just where we define those on the gateway. So this will be the.
Oh, this is the gateway. This is the gateway.
Yeah. This is
okay, so I thought we were on the. Okay, I need to get my orientation. Okay, I thought we were on the relay, and you were hard.
No worries. Sorry, I switched back. I was over here on the relay.
Okay.
I switched back to
the
gateway. Yeah. So this would be for any. These will be the settings for.
Okay. So all right. Another question there, real quick.
On a gateway.
So can you have a camera without a gateway right now?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So then it's almost, we shouldn't be calling it. I shouldn't call that a gateway. I should call that a camera, right? Because it's not really. That gateway is a different thing.
Yeah. I mean, this is the gateway code. This is what it
right. Yeah. It's a little.
Gateway,
yeah.
But.
Well. Okay. I see. All right.
So this all kind of gets, so in other words, so I'm using a map here, which is just because, it's an ES6 JavaScript data structure, since JavaScript, traditionally didn't have a map data structure.
Because for loops
objects. plain
For loops
object, right?
aren't cool anymore.
But I didn't want to use just a plain object because I want to maintain the order of these. So this way, whatever order you define these here, that's how they end up showing up in the GUI. With a plain object, order is not guaranteed. You can have a bunch of different properties, and there are some circumstances where the order can change. Anyway, so that's just kind of the rationale for using a map. So what this actually ends up serializing down to, in other words, the schema that the relay expects is it's an array of arrays, and the first item in the array is the property name, and then the second is the sort of options for that settings property. So that's kind of what you'll need to be building out on the when you send settings from an ESP based device. That's what this is doing right here. It's just saying get an array from that map, and that serializes to this schema right here, the array of arrays. So let's walk through real quick some of the options in here. So again, this is just the property name for the setting. Type, the three types supported right now are integer, Boolean, and one of. I think.
Did you say integer, Boolean, and what?
And one of. I'll explain
okay.
One of. So there's some options here. The type is kind of the main thing that tells us what that setting is expected to be. The rest of the options are type and then default value. Default values is important. The devices cannot send settings to, well, they can send settings to the relay. The relay doesn't update settings based on, the device saying these are my settings. Settings always flow from the relay to the device. So if you're adding a new device and you need some certain, default settings for that, you just need to be sure to set the default value in the definition here. And then the relay will see when it's adding that device, it'll see that there's not a value for resolution width, and it'll just plug in whatever you said the default should be. So label is just for building the GUI. It's just kind of what that field will be labeled as in the UI, and then unit label. I'll explain that one when down in rotation. So then there's validation. So this includes options like is required. You could do for an integer or a number. So that's another type that I expect we'd support as number, which is a non-integer number, or it could be an integer, but allows floating point, in other words, or decimal. So you can have other validation that you could have as minimum. So you could say the minimum is 0. You can't go below 0 for resolution, which is probably what we want here. If this was that's the other one, string type.
Yeah, that's what I was supposed to ask.
What's that?
I was supposed to ask about string, if you had a string object or a string type.
Start documenting this here. So if this was a string, you could have maybe minimum length or max length. So you get the idea there. We'll use that on the relay to make sure that we're actually trying to set valid values. So the relay will do validation of these, but the device, you know, the devices should probably be able to, well, yeah, they should probably be able to do their own validation, and not assume that the settings coming from the relay are valid, even though we you know, they should be. But at least basic validation, like if something's required, and maybe if there's like a certain field that if it doesn't, you know, meet a certain, if it's not valid for that field, it's going to crash the device or something.
Yeah, absolutely, especially when in the C code.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So when the relay sends settings to the device has the opportunity to send an error callback, and then you know, not set the new settings. So then the relay would just show an error to the user. Right. That should never happen, like I said, because we're going to be validating this.
Yeah, and I'm getting a little worried. I'm a little worried with the, you know, how you're setting it up with the map function, ES6. I don't have ES6 in C code, right? So for me to implement what you're doing right now, it doesn't, you know, it's like I don't know exactly how I would do it. You know, it makes more sense to me if you just say, like, if I just send off. I guess those are, you know, it's a JSON object, right? Eventually.
Well, that's why I was talking about. This serializes down to an array. And then each item is just the resolution.
Okay, so if I sent you a JSON object and it was like settings as the key, or, you know, and then the rest is that array, that would make that would be pretty easy to implement on the relay side.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's what the relay is expecting to get. The map is just how we're doing it in JavaScript, because JavaScript has that, makes it convenient.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just an array of these little arrays. So again, it's an array of each settings definition is also an array, and the first item in the array is the property name, and then the second is that object of those options. I'll leave that down there for while we're talking. So this one, like I said, it's kind of a special type. Another type that I anticipate we'll probably run into a need for at some point is a multiple of, and that'll make more sense once I explain what one of is. So this gives us the options for rotation, so one of, basically that just renders down to in the GUI down to like a drop down list or radio buttons, where they can choose one of any of these options that are defined here. So rotation is one of 0 or 180, right? And then these have labels. These values have labels so that so you have the option of specifying, you know, something that's friendlier to read on the front end, if the actual value that the code needs might not make as much sense to the user. So here I just chose normal and upside down. Mm-hmm. I think those will make sense to anyone, whereas, you know, 0 and 180 wouldn't. But this also touches on this this unit label property. If I didn't have labels in there, I could go ahead and add unit label and say degree. And then on the front end, when you see those options, it's going to say 0 degrees and 180 degrees. Mm-hmm. So again, default value and validation, pretty straightforward. The multiple I was talking about would just be if we had a multiple of this would render as a list of checkboxes. Okay. A list of checkboxes, so obviously you can choose more than one, and then the value of that. So if I set value here to let's just say, I don't know, red. And blue. So these would end up, again, this isn't implemented yet because we don't have a need for it yet, but that would end up rendering as a list of checkboxes. And then if you checked, either of them were checked, the value for that settings property would just be an empty array. If red was checked, then it would say red. If blue was also checked, then it would say blue. I'll document all this. You don't have to remember it. I'll write it down. I mean,
right? Because I mean, is it an array of just strings like that, or is it an array of JSON objects? Value red.
Yeah, they could be. So this could be, the values here could be any. It could be a string, could be a number.
Right, but on line 259, where you're doing the array, is that an array? Shouldn't that be an array of the objects value red, comma value blue, or is it only makes the array of the values?
Yeah, just the value.
Okay.
This right here is an object because, again, just like with the one of, we could say like label red. Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to start here with the definitions to kind of give you all an idea of this is the underpinnings of, you know, of how the settings work, and the main thing that this gets us is we have, you know, settings that apply to the device or to the service that, you know, or because the device itself is telling us what the settings for that service is. You know, we don't have settings in there that might be, you know, might be a valid option for one service or one camera, but wouldn't be for another camera. All right, so any more questions on this before we kind of move over to the relay side of this?
I guess I know maybe I'm kind of repeating the point, but where you said red and blue on line 265, I don't see. Are you saying that like set the value options compiles to that? I'm not, you know, because then how are you separating value and label? Because before you're writing the values down there. Like, what are you trying to show? What is 265? What is that array?
That is inside the settings object for this service.
Okay.
Color is going to be an array of the values that are checked.
Okay.
You know, that the user checks on the front end on the GUI.
I see. And then we obviously we don't need the labels. That's kind of for the user. That's not what we.
Yep.
Okay.
If you didn't have them, the user would just see that.
Okay. Makes total sense now. Thank you.
No problem. All right. So on the relay side, like I mentioned, this is supported on both the device level and the service level. It'll be mostly used on services. But to share that capability between the device class and the service class, there's this new class, device settings. So you can see this.settings in the device is a new device settings, and then the same for service. This.settings is a new device settings. So device settings just basically just takes those definitions and keeps track of the state, the current setting state. So it's got a settings object within it. So when it's instantiated.
So we're on the relay now, right?
This is the relay, yes. Okay. So when it's constructed, we apply those defaults, and then this gives us the ability to set new values. So when we set new values, it's kind of similar in it's kind of similar to the procedure for setting a new token. We emit those settings to the device, and as long as the device says, okay, and saves the new settings, then we save them locally. If not, then we don't save them on the relay, and we send an error back to the front end or to whatever called set. And so what this means is the device needs to be connected to set any of its settings. Main reason for that is if we tried to set settings without the device being able to, to weigh in on whether they were valid, the next time that device connects and we try to send the new settings, if there's an error, we don't really have any way of telling the user, hey, those settings that you set 3 days ago on that device would just, the device just connected again, and the settings are invalid. So in order to give that feedback to the user, we have to have the device connected when you set the settings so we can determine if the device accepted those new settings. So another interesting part of this sort of framework is there's also a concept of settings on a service that are defined by the relay. So here, this is the service class on relay. And in addition to whatever settings definitions the device sends, we're also going to say every service has a name setting. Okay. And then further, this would be less common, but a specific service type on the relay could also add to that and say for all camera services there's such and such setting. So this is mostly used for settings that don't that probably don't really do anything on the device itself. Like name, the device is going to get that name, and in the case of like a Hue bulb, it would probably be nice to wire that up to the Hue API and actually change the name of the light bulb in Hue. But basically the settings that we define on the relay side are settings that matter to the relay primarily or exclusively, and the device doesn't really need them or necessarily care about them. Another one that we might have here is like a setting for whether that this service shows up on the dashboard. That's a perfect example of something that like the device itself, couldn't care less, doesn't even know what a dashboard is, right? That's something that's purely a relay thing.
Yeah, which if you've seen my dashboard lately, I think that's going to be pretty soon, especially once we start getting the lighters up and the light switch in every room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I could probably use that. We'll see. Yeah. Once I finish up the setting stuff, that'll probably take me just less than half an hour to add that in, that setting.
Well, I guess the only problem, like how I was using it before, like I would have, like you said on the relay, I would have a tag that would say dashboard or not, but then I had the device list, which I actually think, we kind of talked about doing it based on location. So you'd have like a rooms or whatever, and that's how you can go in and actually turn on. I don't know how. So, because on mine, each card, the cards that showed up on the dashboard were the same cards that showed up in the devices, and they had settings. So you just click on the card and into its settings and change its settings. So if I wanted to show it back up on the dashboard, you'd go into the device category. But I think that we may be a little bit further off from that because we need we have to have concept of locations, right?
I think we can do both. I think we can. I anticipate or I expect that we keep the concept of the dashboard and have like different rooms as a separate thing. So the dashboard can be like you can use that to have like the services that you use most there, and then you could go to look at a specific room to just see all of the services in that room.
Right.
What do you think of that?
Right. I like that. Both seeing the services in a room and seeing maybe just let me see all the deadbolts, right, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So then you could just choose for the dashboard, choose exactly which services you want to see there.
So you would actually put into that set command on line 240, you'd put in there dashboard, a key dashboard and a value, like show or value true or false.
And as a convention, I think I'm gonna prefix all of the relay specific settings with relay, just so as long as a device doesn't use that same or doesn't start a setting name with relay, we won't have a conflict there with the name. I'm not going to do that with names. It's such a basic thing that that I actually, in the case that a device said that a service had a name setting, I just want to overwrite that because, in other words, relay owns the name setting. A device can't do that. But yeah, I would just define a new setting and say type is Boolean, right? I'm actually thinking that I can probably actually do this on the front end, which I probably prefer versus doing it on the relay side. Just kind of better separation of concerns because, again, the server doesn't have a concept of a dashboard. That's a
you're right,
a GUI thing.
Right.
So I think I have an easy way to add that other that third layer.
Well, right,
where these definitions are coming from.
Right, but it obviously needs to be persistent, right?
Yep.
But then I guess that's just that's maybe a settings. But would you think that would be stored on the relay or the device?
What did you say?
Would you think that I would think the relay is where that would be actually stored on, like what database? The relay
is the main source of truth for the settings. It sends them to the device because the device, there may be settings that a device needs access to. So the device needs to know things like, whether the camera is upside down, for instance. So yeah, it sends them to the device, but that goes back to a device can't, like the settings are, the relay is the source of truth for the settings. The device can't tell the relay what its settings are. The relay tells the device what its settings are. And the device, or rather kind of to expand on that, the device tells the relay what settings it supports. And then the relay tells the device what values the user has set for those settings. Okay, so, all right, we're looking good there. 11 o'clock, I think we've got probably like 20 to 30 minutes left, if that's all right with you two.
I see a footer there.
Yep.
Is it sticky?
Oh yeah, of course. Okay, so yeah.
Okay,
so
one small quibble that we kind of talked about putting settings under that, and I don't mind that. I chose not to on Open Automation 1 because whenever I look at native apps, a lot of times they don't, and obviously it kind of saves a little bit of screen real estate. But I guess the conventions on the web is to put the label underneath, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a convention on the web. It's also convention on iOS, and it's preferable whenever you have room in your UI to add a text label. It's always preferable to do it because icons alone are fairly cryptic way to represent actions. Something that actually annoys me about Android is the heavy use of icons without labels, because that's there's I mean, all the research doesn't support using icons without labels. So
yeah, that's interesting. Because I would think, okay, well, just an icon, like on your homepage on your iPhone, do you have labels under each icon on the homepage?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'd have to look. I don't even have my
dock.
Android. Hey, Jeremy, does your Android have? Are you awake? Jeremy, Earth to Jeremy. Okay. Anyways. So it seems a little bit of a taste thing, but I see the rationale, and I think the only complication obviously is language, but we're not worried about that right now.
Yeah, I've never seen internationalization on the roadmap. So. Yeah, and icons also need to be internationalized. So that's not necessarily something that or many icons do. So it's not necessarily something that you avoid completely if you don't use text. Just a quick example of that is Facebook has, I think, 4 different globe icons that they use, depending on where in the world the user is located. They kind of orient the globe differently. And that's kind of a politeness thing, but there are others where a visual metaphor that works for Americans, may not work for someone in India, for instance. It may not come across the same, or even worse, it could end up being something offensive. I've seen case examples of that. So it can actually sometimes be easier to internationalize text than icons, because with icons, you have to have more of an understanding of the culture to successfully internationalize them.
Sure. Although, without getting too much of a tangent, I think there is we are kind of getting a generic, the power icon, and different icons are becoming more cross country.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, there are certain icons that pretty much never really need a text label. Like a plus icon, is pretty much universally understood for adding something, right?
right, because I'm sure there's going to be times where we're going to need an icon that doesn't have a label. There are going to be.
Yep.
Right. So.
Yeah, and that's totally okay. It's not always preferable. If you can have a label, it's almost always better. But yeah, it's a balance between making use of the space that you have available to you in the GUI.
And what about
designing icons that are meaningful?
Like the tooltips, like whenever you hover over something and you get a little.
I've used that. That obviously doesn't work on mobile because most of mobile devices don't have a hover concept,
right?
Or hover capability. Which is frustrating because mobile is where you have the least space to work with labels as well. To kind of despite all of that, I'm actually planning on putting a settings label here, or a settings icon here, and not having a label. So that's one that is fairly universally understood.
Okay.
I don't think it's
necessary
to have a label there.
And you use the gear there?
Yeah, right. Here we have plenty of space for the label, and I think it's beneficial, especially for the dashboard. Like if we look at PiFi, I look at this and I can guess at what is behind there, and I can click on it to go and look. But just by looking at the icon, I don't know what I'm going to see.
Sure, especially with the icon on the left, kind of like showing the dashboard.
Right. Yeah. And so I went with a kind of a more abstract icon for the dashboard in OA2, kind of just playing on the sort of grid of cards,
right.
So again, it's not, that's not an icon. You see it without the label, and you don't know what that means.
Right.
But you see it, and you have the label. Yeah. Oh yeah.
The Windows.
You see it, and you have a label, and and you get familiar. Like, oh, my dashboard has all of my my cards on it. Then it becomes a nice association.
All right, Ethan, what's your opinion on what's your opinion on having the footer kind of drop down as you scroll, do those kinds of things? When you scroll up, it comes up. I'm sure you've seen stuff like that.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's a really good way to make the most of like the space on a small screen, like a phone. You got to be careful with it. The mechanics of it, like the behavior, has to be perfect. Like we've all been on websites that try to do that, and it just does not work right, so that you got to avoid that, and sometimes it just it's about finding the right behavior for your application. So material design has guidelines about when to show, or when and how to show and hide, like the main app toolbar, and I think their guidelines are pretty good. I'd be hesitant to hide the tab bar down here, just because this is, well, you can't see it right now. But because this is an important navigational context. So without being able to see this, you don't, okay, well, to back up a little bit more, one of the most important things in user experience design, when it comes to designing GUIs, is giving the user context for where they are in your app. So you want to have, as much as you want to have enough of a persistent visual indication of where they are. And I think if we hid this toolbar down here, based on scrolling, that
right. Well, obviously, we need to add, whenever you're on the dashboard, have that kind of change.
Yeah. Right. It's going to have an active state. Yeah, exactly. Or a selected state. So yeah, this will turn blue when it's selected. So let's go over to settings. So you have this, you also have this. It looks very plain. Keep in mind, I said this isn't done. So there's a bit of styling left to do, and some icons still that need to get in here. So the idea here is this is a list of the different areas of settings.
Okay, so hold on, Ethan, 1 second. Okay, yeah. So settings there, that's the settings generally where I put the settings for the website, right? Not the settings for the devices.
Right. So that's what. This is both. Okay.
But then we also, I saw on the dashboard you have a settings section, right? On the cards on the dashboard.
Yeah, I'll show you what I mean. So this is my plan here, and you're telling me you hate it. So this would be a list of different areas of settings, so to speak. So account, maybe sharing or something. You might also have rooms in here.
Specific groups.
Right. Yeah. So until we have more than one item, it might actually make more sense to just go ahead and have this say devices, and just go straight to the list of devices, and then we can kind of back out of that and go settings when we add other groups of settings. That's a kind of my thought or what I was intending for this screen.
Okay, but because we obviously, I mean, I'm willing to be convinced either way, but what I've liked before is being able to see a video camera and then say, okay, I need to change the settings on that camera, and then going from that card to the settings really quick versus trying to cross-reference, what's the the ID on that camera, and then go to the settings. I guess in the settings, obviously, you have the name.
Yeah, so the reason you see this here and this here is the dashboard shows services. And so I didn't think that it was difficult to sort of map, like clicking on a settings thing here to going to settings for a device that includes things other than this service. So I'll show you how this works though. I think you'll like it. So we have this, similar to what you had before. And actually, I'm gonna start out in here. So go to devices, and so you get your list of devices. This looks terrible right now, that a bunch of them are just named device. And this will be part of, I think, I'd like to set up the ESP devices and the gateway a little bit better so that they set meaningful device names by default. So like I'm trying to think, I think a good example of what this should say. If I had a Hue light bulb, I think the official name sort of for a Hue bulb with color is a Hue color lamp, right? So if I had a Hue bulb, that should show up in this list as instead of saying device, it should say Hue color lamp.
Okay, so have the device give its name as well as its.
Yeah, exactly. And it should say just like what it is, like literally, it's a hue color lamp, or it's a gateway camera, or
Right, that would be part of its state, I guess you would say, when it's passing the state over to the relay.
I think it would be part of the, or I think it would be like, let me jump over here to the gateway again. I don't know so this is in the camera service. Ignore that fact. And that I'm adding this to the device class, right? I think they should just do this. But I'm not entirely sure. I think I need to try something out, because this might not work for things like well, it doesn't really work since these are static. It doesn't really work for things like a hue light bulb or a door lock, where it's going to be different depending on what the physical device actually is. So I may, yeah, let's do that. So when I was there at the shop, I talked about when you send the device data on load, or when you send the load event, you can include an info object, and that has things like manufacturer.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably just add it there. Just say it can either be, there's model, but that might be like a model number. So let's just add a name property to that. And say whatever that is. I think that's probably the best way to do it. Rather, I think that's where that belongs, because it's a similar type of data as the manufacturer and the model.
So you would send off the default, but would you think that the device
the
would
user
store
can
that?
change it? Yeah. Yeah, the device can store it. It doesn't have to. It's mostly for the relay, and the user can change that. So if I go into this gateway camera, actually I'm going to back out and go to this. So, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. So here's a Liger, right? So I click on here, and I see a list of what I've labeled as features. I'm open to different ideas on this. I'm not crazy about using the word service for the, from the user's perspective. We're calling it a service to the user.
Right. Yeah, that would maybe kind of confusing, but.
So I was just thinking like devices, and devices have features like buttons and cameras and stuff. So when you look at a device in this list, if well, obviously you're seeing the list and you see if a device has more than one service, it's going to show you the name of the first service, and then just say like there are n others. So then when you go and look at that device, it's going to list all those services and then settings for the device, and this is where we can go and set that name. And it'll also list the device info there. Then you can drill into that service and say, and set that service's settings.
Sorry, Ethan, would you imagine this being where you would do the mapping for the automator? Like if you wanted to map that center button to a certain, action through the automator, is this where you would imagine doing that?
Yes and no. I imagine us having a dedicated automator like section of the app, or automations. Like we might have a tab that says automations, and there you would see a list of the automations that you set up. But for certain services, I think we would have like for a button service, the front end should also, just as a convenience, have a UI for that here. So yes.
Right. So
basically, the UI here would automatically set up an automation, and you wouldn't.
So at least be able to see the automation from that. Like, okay, this center button, has these, or associated with these automations, and then maybe be able to actually set it, in that section. But at least being able to view what automations that center button is a part of.
Yeah, possibly, but also so something that HomeKit does with buttons is you can go and create an automation, and obviously, and say, when I push this button, I want that, whatever to happen. But you can also, if you go to the settings for that button, or the switch or whatever it is, then it has, just as if it's another setting, it just has a thing to say, when you push it, what do you want it to do? And that it's kind of like a specialized UI for setting up an automation. And the way they've done it in the UI is you don't even really think of it as an automation. You think of it more like, it looks more like a setting. And so that's what I would like to do here is, for a button, we say, we just have a setting that says, what do you want it to do when you push the button?
Yeah. Right. So
then that creates an automation, but you don't see that like that. But you don't necessarily see that in the list of automations. There are automations that if the user didn't explicitly go to the automations UI and create it, we don't show it there. For example, automations that a device driver creates. That's just kind of like an implementation detail that the user doesn't really need to see, and we don't want to clutter up the list of their automations that they've created themselves, and because those are the ones they really care about. But it sounds kind of weird. We can talk about it more when we actually get into the automation stuff. And I think it could be helpful to kind of show you some sketches or something of what I'm thinking.
Sure, and I like that. I like both of those approaches, having kind of a separate automation UI and doing it how you were saying HomeKit, kind of like where people don't even think about it. Just what does this button do? And because I think when we do it that way, like what does this button do? We already have. That's kind of, now we're leveraging what you guys set up on the back end. With the automation, and we can do it pretty quickly. I can see that feature, coming to fruition fairly quickly versus setting up the automator stuff, which I want eventually. But right now it's like, I want these ligers. I want to be able to test them in my home. I want to be able to pass them out to people so they can start testing them. And if they were just able to go into the settings, what we're looking at right now, and then click through and have a drop down, which you've already kind of set up the way to get the drop down. State definitions, right? So that seems quicker. That seems like we may be able to get something up quicker than doing a whole separate UI.
Yeah, definitely would. And there's a bit of work the main part of the main chunk of work involved there is going to be the code to actually render out the so let's run a scenario here. So when I push the center button, I want to turn all the lights off, right? So in here, I need a UI that lets me choose what services I want to affect. And so that might be, the most basic form of that would be I'd manually select all of the lights, right?
Okay, first you would select lights, like you want to affect lights, right? And then I guess you would say all the lights, right? Because it may be you want to affect the sirens, right? Let's say we have the door sensor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But then the siren, obviously you would want to affect lights and siren, the switch. The door switch wants to affect lights and siren.
Right. So there's this whole UI that has to be built for like choosing services and then seeing all of the state options for those and the form, to choose what state you want to put that service into. In other words, you choose the light services and then you see, brightness, color, power, and you set what you want that light service to be at.
Right. And wouldn't those pull from what we were kind of referring to before, the definitions we were referring to before?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is, a lot of it is there with the settings work on the front end. So I would say that by doing the settings the way that I've done them, we're like halfway there to doing the like showing the forms for creating automations. So I think we could do it pretty quick. Would it be a few hours? No, but it would be probably a couple of days, and not a couple of weeks.
Right. Yeah, because it seems like we have a lot of the back end, at least with the scenes, the automator, for example, that kind of is doing most of the legwork on that.
Yeah, and I think the main thing on the back end, or the next step to get that completely ready for doing the front end is what I was talking about, like with the light service and updating this concept of a state definition, and kind of standardizing that across the services, and so with that, each device is going to have to send its state definitions.
Right. So I guess. So would you imagine sending state definitions over in that settings section, sending the state definitions, or firing functions? Like are you just sending over a state and saying, "Hey, device, go to this state," or are you sending over telling it, triggering a function?
Yeah. So that's that. So what we're doing mostly currently is we're sending these different commands, so to speak, or functions, like you said, by with different event names, right? We're saying brightness set, and then we're passing a brightness, right? But this is all just a bunch of code repeated for no good reason, when all we need to know what state the device or the service supports, and then we only need one
set state,
one thing. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and so that's just going to be emit, and then whatever, and that might be
a get, maybe a state/get.
Well, we've already got the ability for so the way that we get the state from the devices are responsible for pushing state to the relay when their state changes, right? So that load event, the device can send that at any time, not just when it connects. And so whenever its state changes, it can send that, and that will update the state in all of the services. And to make that easier from the ESP, we can probably set something up where because it's harder on the ESP like build a big object of the whole device and all of its services and settings definitions and all of that. If it's easier to on the ESP to just when for instance like for example, when a what's it called, a contact sensor, when the open state changes, you can it's probably all right for the ESP to just send like a contact sensor open event or something like that, and then we can handle building that state out in the driver. I mean, I'm not suggesting that you do that. If it's just as easy, since you're already sending the load event, if it's just as easy to just send that again with the new state, then that's fine too. That's even better.
Right, because I think the load event, I'd have to look at it again, but I think I'm just sending the services available, not the state. But maybe I am. Maybe.
Right, so you want to update that so that like you have your array of services, and let's say you've got like contact sensor, and then for each one, you want to also send
We lost him.
Uh-oh. Okay, I'm looking up my load event while he's getting back.
Your load event sends state.
Does it?
Yeah, it sends contact 1 for connected.
Okay, hold on, I'm gonna pause the.
There isn't a pause. If you just want to keep recording, you can send the file to me at some point, and I can use
I could splice it.
Adobe.
Yeah.
I can use Adobe and splice it out if you want, or whatever.
Hey, sorry about that. My laptop battery died, and I had it on Do Not Disturb, so I didn't see the messages that it was
Screaming at you.
Yeah.
You're good, man.
All right. So back to where we were. Let's see. So really, this whole thing. So when you send load, this whole thing is going to be like the relay is really expecting a JSON representation of that whole device. So it wants to see like the services, property with the list of services. This is where we put settings definitions for the device itself. And each service, let's kind of focus on that for a second. Each service will have its settings definitions. We'll also have state. Also the settings. No, it wouldn't. Sorry. Also have state definitions. Be really similar to settings definitions, and then the state. So whatever properties are defined in state definitions, whenever you send that load event, should send the current state for each service. Make sense?
Uh, hold on. Yeah, I'm looking up actually where I'm sending the load event. I guess
Yeah.
yeah, I was okay, so yeah, I am sending state over. I just wanted to verify
Cool.
with that load event. Okay, so and now you're showing me. So these are the things that I would need to send from the ESP32 services, and then have the services is going to be an array of JSON objects, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So I guess it would be also ID. And I mean, one way that's an easy way to see what the relay is expecting is to look at what the gateway is doing. So we can see relay serialize, which first of all, and you can look at this in service and device. I'm hearing a bad echo.
Oh, okay. Oh, and we're also going to have an info in there, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So like we're sending for the service on the gateway, you can see it's sending ID type settings, and let's see. Yep. And this is actually unnecessary now since the relay is now handling settings. But then, and that's just the base sort of serialized method. Then the relay specific serialized method does all of those properties and then adds state and settings definitions, right? Mm-hmm. So you can look at that for device as well on the gateway. It's doing ID, info, services, and state. Let's see. Yeah, so that would also be info. And this is what manufacturer, model, serial. I don't remember all the ones that we mentioned. I think it's in here. Yeah, manufacturer, model, firmware version, hardware version, serial. We're gonna add name to this. So yeah, so I want to get this to where we don't need all of these repetitive like service specific event names. It's just everything is, or almost everything is just based on those state definitions, and we can just send a event to set a specific property state, or to set well, I haven't completely decided or figured out what's best there yet. Probably just sending like the whole.
You thinking whether to say just the state that's changing or the entire state?
Yeah, I think probably just the state that's changing, because the problem if we try and do it with the entire state is we might there's a life cycle here. What happens is we've already seen how the device sends state to the relay, right? So if the relay sends, and so let's call this an action, like this, with, you know, telling it to change its state. The relay sends an action to the device, and the device performs the action. For example, setting a light brightness to 100. Then the device sends load with the current state. Back to relay. So on the relay, if we change brightness, but we've also got power and color. If we have to send the whole state, that means we need to include, you know, our brightness color. So if we change brightness, the user changes brightness and we send all of this, and these two are based on the current state on the relay. This, the state, the most recent state that the relay is aware of. If you then immediately call another or change color, and we send this whole thing again, but the device hasn't sent the new brightness state back, then our color change is going to have the old brightness. So in other words, we're telling the device to set the brightness back to what it was before we changed it.
Right.
We want this to be an individual property.
Would there be a similar problem if on sending back? So like if I sent from the device back up, hey, you just changed the color property. Why send the whole? Tell you to load the whole state again versus just sending back the color value that was changed?
Yeah, we can kind of optimize that to where we can use a callback here. So if there's no error, then this.state.property equals value, right? So we update it locally based on that. So that
right. So then you wouldn't need a load, right? From that, you would just, if I respond to the callback, that the setting has been changed, then I wouldn't even need to send back a load.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and the only reason that we send the load on the gateway whenever state changes is because state can change in response to something other than the relay, right? Like a contact sensor. When the contact sensor opens, it's the device initiating that, and it needs to send that new state.
Yeah, but I don't do that through load. I do that through the specific,
Yeah, and that's fine. It's just that's fine. This is how the gateway does it, just because it's convenient, and it just so it's an easy way to just grab the whole state, the latest. Yeah. So it might not be the most network efficient, but the amount of data we're transferring is,
Yeah, but hopefully we get into the thousands of devices, and then every bit matters.
Yeah, and we can optimize that. And we can add another thing in device that listens for a specific state update for a specific service. Oh, okay. Actually, I already have that. Scratch that. So I had forgotten about this. So the gateway sends load if state at the device level changes, but it also has a service level event where it can just send the current state for just that service, rather where the relay can receive the current state for just that service. But this life cycle, still applies. It's the same concept. Okay.
Okay. Are you planning on getting into more of the React side of this? Yeah.
Let's hop back over here. Okay, so with looking at this again, with a device that has more than one service, just to refresh your memory, I got there by going to the devices list and I clicked on that Liger device. If it has more than one service, it's going to list out the services here, and then you can click on each one to go to the details for that service. That's kind of a little. It doesn't make as much sense if a device that only has one service, which is going to be most devices probably. So for a camera, for instance, I click on this gateway camera, And instead of a list of services, I just get that camera's settings in line here. There's still the device settings down here, just like there was before. But this is the main thing that you really care about when you have a device that only has one service. That service is it. Like, that's the thing you care about, right? We've got this camera, and you click on it, and you want to change the camera settings. So that's front and center. And then with multiple services, you still have this capability of choosing, which one you want to edit. Where was I? There we go. So here you can see how those settings definitions on the gateway translated to the UI. We've got our resolution width, resolution height, orientation, and record movement option. And so when I change these, let's go ahead and change the camera name. Let's say Balcony. That's it. It's that's updated on the gateway, or on the relay, and on the gateway now.
So there's no save icon or save button.
Yeah, and that was one thing I really wanted to accomplish with this, since we want this to be mobile first. It's just auto save. I think makes a lot of sense here.
And then maybe some like
settings UI
feedback, maybe some feedback in the future, like a green check mark or something.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Android has or Material Design has a convention of using snack bars at the bottom sometimes when I like to confirm application state.
Yeah, I think they also call those like toast, but I prefer to have it more in the element that you're changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that too. So I can look at options for how that would look, because obviously it's going to be a little bit different depending on if it's a text input or a checkbox or whatever. And then a couple other points here. Plans for the future are making this look like a switch and behave like a switch instead of just being a checkbox. And
a toggle, is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I can definitely see doing the choose of multiple of option, especially like, let's say we want to set up certain light services with the center button. Well, then obviously you're gonna have to do a multiple of those lights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then for one of my plan right now is, so right now it's just a native select list. My plan for this is if it's a small number of options, if it's like 3 or 4 or less, to use radio buttons, and then for a larger number of options, since that would take up too much space, change it to a drop down. And I think in Material Design, drop downs generally they look like text fields, but with a drop down functionality and an arrow. So that'll change a little bit. And so yeah, there's a bit of styling here to kind of get together still. Did I change this back, or did something? No, I changed that back. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. So if a text field, a couple of kind of nice things to point out here. If a text field is required and you delete the value, it just goes back to whatever the initial value was, since we know that that's a good value for that option, rather than showing the user an error. It's nice to find ways to avoid error states when there's a good way to do that. So this is a nice way to do that. And we're still showing, when they delete that value, they can see that's what it's going to go back to.
And I noticed you're using, you have delete in the top right. And what was
Yep.
your rationale putting it up there versus kind of like as a list value, kind of at the bottom?
I did consider at the bottom, and we might want to make that switch since it's a seldom used option. But this is kind of, the toolbar is, the kind of the main space for contextual actions like that. And since we don't have any other contextual actions, so we have plenty of room up here, it made sense to me to just put it there. It does kind of make a bit more, a bit more sense on a small screen that's more familiar, to what, to see something, easily within reach there. But I could go either way on it.
And is that just an alignment issue with the boxes going through the words, like resolution width, resolution height?
It's not alignment, because that is the correct positioning of the label, but
or hide the line behind it, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what needs to happen, and so I'm going to work on that. It's basically I have to change this to. It's not the easiest thing to do. I'll just say that. But let's see. But once we get that, then those text fields are basically completely in line with the material design spec, which we can see. You can see an example of like the animation. Go to the login page.
Yeah.
So I don't know how well the animation comes across in the over screen sharing, but
that's nice. I like that. Now the blue kind of doesn't flow with the rest. It seems like
this here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is that the same blue as up there with devices and delete?
No, it's not. This is native. This is Mac OS.
Okay, yeah, it definitely stands out. It definitely looks different.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we definitely want to. Why isn't that scroll bar going away? There we go. Yeah, we definitely want to get those.
Oh, nice! That black scroll bar. Is that?
Yeah, that's Mac OS too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, that's why I was talking about. I want to make this a switch, which is the material design terminology for it, and then turn this into a drop down or /radio buttons. It's always nicer when you can have your own, styled controls rather than using native. Let's see. So. So yeah, this screen will look great once we get all the device names and icons in. And you can see, when I change that name, obviously you can see that service name down there. So yeah, looking at this in React, back up here. Another thing that we need to set aside some time for at some point is doing animations between these screens, having a slide. That'll help a lot in terms of kind of keeping your spatial, your context, keeping your bearings where you are in the app. This screen right here is the settings screen component. There's a special little component that I made here called navigation screen. And this is what gives us this ability to have like the title and the back button here in the toolbar. So you can actually throw this navigation screen component into any component and set the path and the title that you want, and you'll get that in the toolbar automatically. There's this property as context root, and that is basically it keeps track of sort of the history of the screens that you've navigated through, separate for different contexts. In other words, I switched to from the dashboard to settings, and that's a separate context for the toolbar navigation, which means I can navigate or drill down in here and go back to the dashboard, come back to settings, and I've still got that state. And I can even in dashboard, drill down into something else, and I can switch back and forth between them, and they've got their own context for navigation. So when you want to start a new context route, you set that to true. So an instance of where you might do that is if we added a modal overlay, which is, on mobile platforms, it's usually something that slides up from the bottom and covers the whole screen, and then you have cancel or save or done or something like that. So that would be a new navigation context. But getting to the actual screen content here, though, obviously this is pretty simple. It's just this list component with that one option. And then we navigate to there, and this is the devices list screen. Again, you can see the navigation screen component here. And then some routes here. So this is our main route here for this screen, but we also have a route for drilling down into a device and showing the device details screen component. And then the last route is just kind of a catch-all, so that if I were to if I put a URL, basically it just makes it, if I put an invalid URL into there, it just redirects back to the main screen here, or an invalid device ID, or it causes an error. Let's see what happened. Let's fix that later. So again, another list component, and here we're just listing out the devices. We've got icon, label, secondary text, and the secondary text is just camera or center button and any other features, etc. And then the link to the details for that device. I'll go to this Liger.
Adding, I think it'd be nice if we added a preview picture to those device lists. If there's a preview image for the camera, that may be nice. But that's just one thing.
Yeah. Then on the device details screen here, this one is where we kind of get a little complicated. And of course, we have the navigation screen. And another option here for the navigation screen component is toolbar actions, which is how we're getting that delete button up in the toolbar. And that you just pass it in a React component and it'll render it there. And then we have our routes again. So the routes for all these screens are set up to where you can load these in any order or from any other component, and it'll all work fine, which is why I can go to, I can click on settings here, and it's the same, showing me the same thing as if I click on settings here. Mm-hmm. So here I'm on the dashboard, here I'm on settings. And that's the same, so that's the same component. So here we check to see if it has more than one service, then we render that list of the services like I showed you. If it doesn't, then we just render the service details component for that first service. And then below that are the device settings, which includes the device name, and then the info. So this is all being wired up to the store with map state to props, like I've shown you all before. Let me switch back to the devices list screen and show that. So this one is pretty simple. We just got devices, and we get devices from the store. But I'm also when we get the list of devices, they have in the store an array of their services. But it's just an ID and a type. So right here, I'm hydrating that, so I'm getting the whole object for each of the service. We get service by ID. And that's because on this screen, I want to access like the data for the service, like the name and the icon and stuff like that, or be able to build the icon. So back to the device details screen, map state to props, we're getting the device from the store, get device by ID, and we're getting the ID, of course, we need the ID, we're getting that from the route. When you have, like we do on the devices list screen, when you have a route and pass it a component, which is our device details screen, it passes some props about that route, or with routing data. So that's what match is. It's the data for what how the URL and the address bar matched our route. So one of the parameters in the URL is device ID. So we're getting that from the URL. And
I guess that's good that we're getting it from the URL, so we can send direct links to these different features, right?
Yep, exactly. And people can bookmark them, etc. So this is just a little thing to redirect if the device wasn't found in the store. We'll just redirect back to the devices list. That could happen if somebody deleted a device and then went to bookmark or something for that device. And so the props that we're actually passing into our component up here, our device detail screen component, are the device with its services hydrated, like I was showing you. And then and then these two options, settings and settings definitions. The reason I've separated these out from the device object is these are actually being used by a higher order component. I don't remember. I don't think I've really explained higher order components before. It doesn't sound familiar, right?
Yeah, I don't remember you going over that. And so when you say hydrate components, is that your terminology or?
Hydrating is just like in code, it's like when you have like some representation of some data, but it's not the full data. Like it might just be a pointer to data or an ID, which is the case here. The device has an array of IDs. So hydrating it just means turn that list of IDs into a list of actual service objects.
Okay.
So it's not my terminology. Might be using it wrong, but it's not mine. So a higher order component is just really, ultimately, it's just a function that returns a component. But it's a way of adding functionality to another component. So what I'm doing here is this is the higher order component. And I've called it with settings saver. And this is a convention with higher order components in React to just start them with the word with. And the way that you use a higher order component is you pass in the component that you're wrapping to that function. And then that returns a new component that has added functionality to your component. It's kind of like a mixin. If you're familiar with the concept of mixin, but it's kind of like a mixin, but it is more true to the like mode of, or the idea of like of composition, especially in the React world. So we look at this higher order component. What this does is it adds the functionality of actually saving these settings. So that's functionality that I need in multiple components. I need it in this device detail screen, but I also need it in a service detail screen to save the service settings. So rather than duplicate all that functionality in each component, I created a higher order component to add the functionality or to share the functionality between them. So like I said, it's just a function that takes the wrapped component as an argument and then returns a new component. In this case, it's called settings saver. And I won't go into detail about what this is doing. I'll just say this is what handles when you change something in here. This is what handles sending that to the relay and or setting this back. If you get rid of it and it's a required value, it sets it back to the original value. So that's what this HOC does. But the way that the higher order components work is it's a function. You pass in the component you want to add the functionality to, and then it returns a new component, but that new component just renders the component that you passed in and adds props to it. And it doesn't even necessarily have to add props. In this case, I am adding props. I'm adding this on setting change function. So back here in the device details screen, these two settings and settings definitions, I'm adding those to the props in map state to props because they're needed by the settings saver HOC. So it uses settings and settings definitions to know how to handle these changes in the form and save them. And then the third prop that I'm passing into there is this save settings, and that is just a function that settings saver uses whenever whenever it's ready to push, a settings change to the relay, it just calls that function with the new settings. What that function is actually doing in the device detail screen is dispatching an operation, a set device settings operation with the device ID, the new settings, and the current settings. The reason I'm passing the current settings is if there's an error, that operation is going to set the, let me back up a little bit. When I make a change in the form, it immediately updates the state for that service or that device in the store. So this is called an optimistic update. In other words, we're optimistic that the server is going to accept the change and there aren't going to be any errors. So let's just go ahead and pretend that server already told us that everything is good and make the change. What that means though is if there does end up being an error, we have to undo that change in the store because we don't want the front end to be, in a state that doesn't reflect the actual state. So we're setting the new settings and also passing in the existing settings. So what the operation will do is if the relay sends an error back, it'll set the device settings back to what they were before that change. A lot to take in.
Yeah, a little bit. So I kind of want to go over, like, let's say I want to add like the local and public IP address to the settings list. What would have to be changed, if anything, here? If we wanted to add that.
Yeah. So what I would do in that case is on the relay in the device class. Excuse me. The device has a state object, and currently all we use it for is connected, the connected state. I would go ahead and add a couple of properties here. Actually, I don't need to add these here, but basically, in the device class, you would get those values, and then
you said you wouldn't add them there. You wouldn't add them there, or
what's that?
You said you wouldn't add them there where you were typing in.
Well, I was just saying those are just the default values, and I have a default value for connected, just out of fairness. But for those, it doesn't really make sense. The null isn't really a default value; it's just null. So, but I guess we would probably get we'd probably get that on the connection event, right, from the socket. And so then we would set that on where we subscribe to driver connect. There we go. So in here, we'd I'm going to pseudocode this up. We'd say we'd get IP addresses, and then sys.state.remote IP equals remote IP, and then same for local IP.
Okay, so when you say get IP address, the pseudocode get IP address, that's not a promise, is it? That's not a promise
this isn't
to
anything. This is literally just me saying, do some code to get the IP addresses.
Okay.
So I don't remember how you were doing that.
I'm trying to think about how to send that from my perspective. Like if I'm on the ESP32, do I send that in the load event, in the info?
Yeah, you totally can, because in the load event, you can add a state property for the device, and that'll get set on on the device's state. So by doing that, by getting those, let's see. The reason I was thinking doing it in the Connect, at least for the remote IP, local IP is like, you're talking like on their local network, like the IP of the gateway, for instance, the Raspberry Pi or something.
Right. That's a local IP. Remote IP is a little more, and that could be an array. You could have multiple, local IPs, obviously. And,
right.
And so you can have multiple remote IPs, right? So there's kind of assumptions. How I was doing it before is I literally had like a little script that I would get the public IP. So the IP that's facing the relay was the remote IP.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you can actually get that from the socket IO metadata.
Yeah, you can.
From the headers. So I would do that on Connect. That way you still get it, even if like there's something wrong with the device or with the network, and you never get the load event. Then you can still get the remote IP.
Right.
So that would be useful, and then you can do the local IP. You can include it in load, But either way, however we do this, once those properties are on this .state, that automatically gets pushed down to the front end. So then in our device details screen component, we can come down to info and we can just say remote IP device.state.remote IP. And there you go. Cool.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Are you getting that, Jeremy? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's one of the nice things about WebSockets is, we got it all set up to where anytime we make a change on the relay, we're pushing that down to the client right away. We're not doing it in the most efficient way. We're actually sending the whole array and the whole list of devices for that account every time, no matter how small the change is. But we can optimize that in the future. Currently, it's
Yeah, and relative to streaming video.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it happens. It happens fast, right? Like if you'll see when a change happens, or if you like unlock or lock a lock, the whole round trip is pretty quick. But yeah,
that's a couple of seconds for the lock to change for some reason.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's going to depend on the network conditions, and we don't for like service state changes. We don't have that like the optimistic updates yet. So it is literally just waiting until the device comes back.
It gets the callback. Yeah, the callback is what takes so long because you can hit the button and you can hear it lock immediately, but then it like waits for a second polling deal before it sends another. It like waits till the next polling, and then when it sends that next polling, then it updates it. It doesn't like it doesn't send like an actual callback until it polls the state change.
Right, and that's just kind of the nature of Z-Wave devices. There's going to be some
delay. So we may want to introduce another state called you have locking, and locked, right? So the locking would be that kind of when you're in limbo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the optimistic until it actually receives it.
Right, but I don't know. Would that be optimistic if you're saying locking? You're not saying locked. You're just saying we don't know yet.
Yeah, but I guess that wouldn't technically be optimistic if you're not just saying it's locked, which I think is the right thing to do in this case is to tell the user it's locking, because if they tap the button and look away and assume that it locked, we want them to know. I think the best feedback in the case of we're controlling physical devices like this is for them to know the state of the process. In other words, they want to know when it actually gets locked, right? And confirm, okay, my door is locked, because that's important to if you're trying to lock a door, you want to know when it's actually locked. versus an optimistic update, which is fine for settings, because it's not like, you're not controlling the physical access to a space, but if we did optimistic updates there, then it would be, I think it would, the risk would be, it would get users in the habit of assuming, like taking on that optimism and saying, okay, my door is locked. And then they may not notice when it, if it failed to lock for some reason.
Right. Yeah.
So that would be pretty easy to do. We wouldn't need to, we can handle that completely on the front end. We wouldn't need to add anything to state for that, because on the front end, we know, okay, we sent an API event to lock the door, but we haven't heard back yet. So we know when we're in that state that we're waiting for good. It's basically a special kind of loading state. All right. Where are we? Oh, right. I feel like there was something I was going to say on. I don't remember. So I think we were talking about the settings saver. That's so yeah, the main takeaway there is just higher order components are a way to add functionality to share functionality between multiple components in a composable way, and that's what the settings saver component is. So we use that in the device details.
So would you use the show dashboard there as well? Like the show on dashboard.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that would be on. Okay, so that the dashboard shows services. So that would be in the service settings. So let's come over here to the service details. So the service details are a little bit different. With the device details screen, I've got device details screen, and that includes like the navigation screen component and all of the routing specific stuff. With service details, the requirements are a little bit different, because I wanted to be able to show the service details in line in the device details, or show them as a separate screen, like in the case of when you have multiple services on a device. So the service details screen. Well, let's start out with there's a service details component.
Right. Actually, I kind of I'm surprised I just noticed that, like the settings detail. So whenever you go in on the dashboard, it doesn't go into the services. It doesn't list all the services. How is the service detail different than the?
Right. So the dashboard, when you click on settings here, it's going to go to settings for that specific service, not for the device, which makes sense.
Okay.
This is the object you're dealing with, that service, and those are the settings you see.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this is still a screen. So the service details component just has the content without like the navigation screen or any of the routing, wiring up the routing or any of that. So this is something we can drop into the device details screen like we do here. Where did that go? Service details. When there's only one service, we are into the service details in line. So then we have a service details screen, which has all the navigation screen and the routing stuff, like getting the service ID from the route match. It has all that separated out into this separate component, and then that just renders the service details. So that's how I handled that. So it's stuff like that that makes me really appreciate React, because it's really easy to see. It's really easy once you get a little experience working with components, and a little experience like going like, I want to do this, and I don't know what the best way is. So you start, duck going. That's a terrible verb. You start Googling, how to do whatever. Okay. My point was, once you kind of get a little bit of React under your belt, you start thinking in a compositional way. And that's one of the things I appreciate the most about React is the limitations in React help you learn how to write good, how to structure your app in a good way, because there just aren't options there aren't a lot of options that other libraries might have. But those options are often things that are just going to get you in trouble and encourage you to structure your app in a way that's going to cause bugs or cause it to be hard to maintain. So React is a little bit not hard, but there's a learning curve. But once you get into that mindset, it's great because you just start thinking in this natural, compositional way with the unidirectional data flow, and it's easy. It starts to get easier and easier to see I can just split up my components this way, and make them really reusable. Yeah. So that's okay. So we've gotten down. Basically, that's the service details. Oh, I didn't walk through the actual service details component. So again, we're passing in the props for the settings saver, settings and settings definitions, and the save settings function. And then we wrap our service details component with settings saver. And then I think what I might not have explained about the settings saver is it passes. I don't think I completely explained it. So settings saver passes in some props that we use in the form. One is the function that we need to call when a field value changes. So on setting change is what we call when something in the form changes. So we just attach that to our settings fields, and then settings and original settings are also things that we use in the form. Let's see. So there's a difference between, obviously service has a property called settings. There is a service.settings. That's coming straight from the store. The settings that the settings saver passes are actually not the same, though, not necessarily the same, because there's a moment of time between when I type when I change the content of this box and when that operation fires and the store is updated, when this box is not in the same state as the store. And in fact, I'll show you. I think the best way to show this is if you look down if I change this field, you look down in the console, you see the save settings and the API response, right? If I clear that, and if I just keep typing in here, right, nothing happens. Even though we're calling save settings on every change, it's not until I stop.
And is that the debounce thing?
Yeah. So it's debounced, and so it only does it basically if it stops changing for half a second. In other words, it sends it to the server. That way, we're not just like hammering the relay with changes. We only do it, when it's reasonable to assume that they've stopped typing. And I think half a second is kind of a good threshold there. But what that means is for that half a second, this value is different than what's in the store. So that's why the settings saver passes in settings to the actual for us to use with the form fields, because we want the form fields to show what the user just typed, not necessarily what's in the store. And I can show you the differences that this makes by if I change this to use service.settings for the value of the name field up here. I save this, and then I go and change something in here. So I hit backspace, and then half a second later, the Y disappears. Or I hit Y, and half a second. It's hard for y'all to see because you don't know when I'm hitting the key. But, well, here, I can do this. Copy this, and then paste. Wait, I didn't do anything.
Take two.
It's trying to defeat me. Well, anyway, the point is, the point is the store is not updated until we actually save those settings. So we want to use the settings that are in the setting that the setting saver is passing into the component. That way, it's there's no delay, you know, when they between when they type something and when it shows up in the
Right, I noticed that the save settings sends the entire object back, which we kind of talked about.
Yeah, right. Okay, so that the rest of this service details thing is pretty standard. I've got this settings field component for the name, and then I've got a check here basically to see if there are additional settings, and if there are, then to render this settings form, which is where we get these. So let's bring up that settings form component. Let's see. So settings form accepts a fields prop and an on-field change prop, which is where we pass in that function that the settings saver gave us. And the fields is just an array of objects with objects that describe each field. So the object is tells us what property it is. It passes in the definition, the settings definition for that property, the current value, and then the original value. Here I'm not passing in the name property because I am handling that separately up here because I wanted to do something different with this with the name field up here instead of just putting it in line with the rest of the settings. And so it passes in that array of fields to settings form, and then settings form is super simple. It just renders a settings field for each one of those. So let's open up settings field. The settings field, the render is essentially just a switch that renders the appropriate control depending on what type is set to in the settings definition. So for strings, integers, numbers, we render a text field, and then for Boolean a switch field, and one of we render a select field. So that's pretty simple as well. You can see here how, if you remember, on the gateway and the camera service, we have rotation is one of these value options. So down here in the React, rotation will render, or will fire this case, and we'll get a select field, and then it uses that definition.value options and renders an option with the value and the label that's set in the definition. The text field has this mask property. That's the only really interesting thing about it. And that's how I get this functionality here, where if I delete everything, it's going to show me with this mask that it's going to reset it back to the original value. So here I'm just saying if the current value is empty, and is empty is just a utility function that I have in utilities.js. So if it's empty and it's required, then the mask should show the original value. So if it's empty and it's required, then show the original value. If I were to, let's say I go back to the gateway and change resolution height and say that's not required. I'll save that. And that. And see something from my, sorry, I didn't see my, oh, I'm on do not disturb. Right, okay, sorry about that. So I changed that, let's restart the gateway. Oh, I forgot I had these. Made a mess here. Again.
It's like a mismatch of brackets or something.
Yeah, well, I forgot I was playing around in that file. So I changed resolution height so it's not required. Now if I get rid of that, then you can just set it to, empty, basically. So you can see that's the difference that makes. Resolution width is required. Height is not required.
Okay.
Yeah. So as far as React goes, that's it. I could show you all the operations that I added to do this. It's not very interesting.
Well, yeah, let's see them real quick though.
Sure. Yeah.
Just for completeness.
Yeah. So here's a devices list, operations, and we just got set device settings and delete device. So you can see the optimistic update here. On set device settings, so we're getting, like we saw in the component, we're passing in the ID, the settings, and the original settings, and we're immediately dispatching set settings, which updates the store. And so that's our optimistic update. We're not waiting for the server to tell us that to give us a good response to update the store, and then we send it off to the relay and catch any errors. And so on an error, we dispatch set settings error with the original settings, and then in the reducer, you can see set settings error just literally just finds that device ID and sets the settings to the original settings, and then obviously sets the error message so we can use that in the React component. Let's see. So and then the services is 1 second. Sorry. The same thing with delete device. That's optimistic. And then services is the same set service settings. Looks pretty much identical. The one thing I didn't show is delete device. Oops. So I gotta delete this one. Did I break something? This was working. Trying just reloading. See if that fixed it. That's unusual. Maybe it's because I shouldn't do that, but maybe it's because I had responsive mode on. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so click delete, and just a simple confirmation. Currently, delete on the relay doesn't handle anything like.
Yeah, you'd have like a modal there or something, right?
What's that?
You would have one of the slide up modals right there when you try to do delete. Isn't that?
I don't think there's so usually like a slide up modal like that is if you want to, is more appropriate for if you have some, more options that you kind of want to let the user do. A modal state like that, like a modal dialog like that, or a modal window like that is most appropriate for when you have some task that the user wants to do that they need that you need the user to confirm or cancel explicitly. So that's why it's called a mobile.
Don't you want to be able to you need to confirm the.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's the same logic here. I was just saying that having the whole like slide up thing is a really heavy UI where a simple like question dialogue like this I think is lighter.
So what happens if they say
a custom dialogue would be nice though.
Right, yeah, that just seems very kind of archaic with the pop up like that, like an alert box.
It's
So, because what happens if you click prevent this page from now? You can't delete any devices, right?
Yeah. Until you reload the page.
Right. So,
I agree. We should have a custom dialogue.
Would you still imagine that being a pop-up, or would that be more embedded in the interface, like when you click delete, like having confirmation right there, like in the header?
That's an option. I think I don't think that it's a good option for this space because because especially for something destructive, when you're asking a user for confirmation, you want to state very very clearly what they're doing.
And block the user, right?
Yeah, right. So if I click delete, and I'm on a small screen, there's not a lot of space to work with here to show, that message.
Right.
So I think having like a modal confirmation dialog.
What about putting the delete on the device level and not inside the device, where you can select multiple devices to be deleted if you wanted more than one? Because I know that's how like apps and stuff work on phone. When you want to delete multiple apps, like select multiple or select single or whatever.
I feel like that's kind of a higher order property of once we get this. We want this, and then we can go to that.
Yeah, and I think deleting devices is something, obviously we do that a lot because we're in development, but for the actual users, I think it's something they're going to be doing seldomly, and I think the risk of having something powerful enough to delete a bunch of devices at once the risk of them doing something they didn't want to do is too great to justify, giving that option to them, since it's rare that anyone is going to want to delete multiple devices. Anyone but us. But it's an option we can look at. I think Andy's right. Like, this is kind of the fundamental thing, or the main need that we need, is just ability to delete one. And then even if we don't do like multiple select, still possibility of adding the option to delete devices out here. But I really, like I said before, I think it's just not going to be a common enough action that it just doesn't really deserve to be that prominent out here in the list.
Do you think on the device list, when you go back to your device list, is that where we would have the add device button?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
And do you think that should be at the bottom? It looks like we're not using the top right corner, so maybe a plus there could work.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a perfect place for it. Yeah.
Okay, so what do we have left?
Oh yeah, so I was going to actually delete the device. I forgot. Yeah, so in the process of testing this, I got really annoyed with having to go and reset the tokens on my devices to re-add them. So I made a change that, quick change that I think we'll all appreciate. And that
does it delete the settings token so it automatically creates it?
Well, if a device connects to the relay and it's an unknown device, it doesn't belong to any account, the relay just tells it to set its token back to its ID.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. So that step is automated now, and or will be, with these changes. Anyway, so I'll delete this device, and of course I got an error.
We need to think about that in the context of security, though, maybe a little bit of how having that ability to reset a device, by a certain response. And
it so I think, I was thinking about that. I think the security there is the same basic security that applies to everything we're doing with devices, and that is that you should not point your device to a relay that you don't trust.
Right.
So by virtue of connecting your device to pi-fi.org,
there's some level
you're saying
trust.
That there's some level of trust, exactly. And it's not like it's not it's not like we're like obliterating all the data on the device. We are just resetting the token, but that's a major thing, because that's like the token is how we authenticate and make sure that that only people who should have access to a device have access to it. But yeah, I mean, the relay could just as easily, that's the issue. The issue is not what we're telling the device to do. The issue is if the device connects to the relay, there's a lot of stuff the relay can do that wouldn't be good if it's a malicious server. And and there's not really any way to get around that, because that's all stuff that the relay has to be able to do when it's not a malicious server.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously the SSL really hopefully makes it so you know what domain you're talking to.
Yeah, and that's the main risk here, is man-in-the-middle attacks. So
of course, if they do something like change PYFI to PIFI, right? Then even if they're using SSL,
right? Yeah. So it might be worth yeah. I mean, there are ways we can mitigate that if it becomes an issue. But if somebody's operating PIFI.org as an open automation relay, I think we'll figure it out. I mean, oh yeah. So I was saying, yeah, the other thing, if I don't think it's a very large vector, or I don't think it's a vector with a very large surface. But if we get more nervous about it, or we identify that it's like a bigger risk than what I'm thinking now, then there are things we can do to mitigate it, like like have a whitelist of relays that you have to like explicitly set a config option if you want to use something not on the whitelist or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it comes down to don't connect to a relay you don't trust, and to use SSL so that so you don't have them, so you're not open to man in the middle. Because that could, if the gateway's not connecting or the device is not connecting over SSL, then anyone can just man in the middle and tell the device to reset its token, and then they've got access to the device. Exactly. And it's silent. It would be silent too. You wouldn't notice unless you looked on the device and checked the token.
Right. Which makes me think that there should be some event that gets spit out. But again, if you're a man in the middle, you can just take that event and throw it away.
Yep. Yep. If you're man in the middle, all bets are off. So SSL, that's the solution. And hopefully no one has secretly broken it. Or cracked it, I should say.
And if they have, we probably wouldn't know about it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of gone over everything. There's a lot of relay code. I didn't go into device settings in very much detail, but we've been at this for a couple of hours now. I don't think it's worth it. It's kind of fairly standard stuff. It just sets settings and sends them to the device and does some validation. What was I going to say? Sorry, I'm still like exhausted from adjusting my life to getting up at night with times at night with a toddler.
Yeah, luckily Jonas sleeps he sleeps like 10 hours, 12 hours.
Yeah.
You should have called him Ethan.
Yeah, okay. I miss those days. My child didn't, because she as an infant, she slept through the night all the time. It was like, no problem. Well, I mean, there was a period of time, I should say. Obviously, as a newborn, she didn't do that. She ate every 10 minutes. But yeah, now it's just like, she's just like, yeah, I don't want to sleep ever. I just want to play. And it's great. It's so funny. Like, she's a year and a half, but like, I don't know, like.
Right. So Jonas is just getting to a year. He's almost at a year, and he's not walking. Yeah. He's not walking yet, and he's not even crawling. But he can get on a table or something and pull himself up and kind of like scoot around.
Yeah.
And we just got him a Batmobile. I just got him a Batmobile. He can kind of, because I want him to interact with his environment. Right?
Yeah.
Not just be in one location. So.
Right.
But she's probably interacting with her environment a lot.
Well, yes, she is. It's a blessing to not have a child who can't walk yet.
Yeah.
When she started walking, it was like she started walking at like 7 months.
Wow.
So we were completely caught off guard. So I had to spend like that whole weekend like rearranging our apartment. Yeah, like it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man.
Yes. So, but it's fun. She like gets up in the morning now and is like, all right, where are my toys? I just want to play. It's a lot of fun.
That's funny. Well, okay. So I guess, have we covered pretty much everything on,
yeah, pretty much. So I'm gonna finish up today, finish up styling and a little bit more. There are just like a couple of interaction things that I need to account for. Like right now, you probably didn't notice it, but the only two devices that are connected are these two.
Uh-huh.
So when you go to, like, it needs to show that it's just not connected here and not let you try and change settings. Right now, you just get an error. So,
Right.
so just a couple of things to wrap up. I don't see any reason why this, I can't, get this closed out today. And if I don't, then I've already spent longer on this than it should have taken, and so I'll make a one-time exception if I don't finish it today, and I'll work for free tomorrow.
Well, yeah, because we really want to move on to the thermostat, obviously, and the deadbolt. But no, this is great. I mean, what you showed me here, like, the only problem is when I don't know what's going on, right? And now,
I know, and I was thinking about that because, like, I realized the other day that, like, my communication has been really terrible the last couple of weeks, and I'm sorry about that. And the only, it's just, I'm just in like a period of life where I've got a lot of adjustments, so I'll get better at that. So.
No, absolutely, and I almost don't, like, in some ways I'm nervous, but hey, I'm gonna have to swallow that because in my mind I'm thinking, well, if it's trust, right? Just like we were talking, there's trust that I know that you're doing good work, even if I don't know exactly what it is, right? That goes with trust. You know this stuff better than I do. And so I don't want to interact with it too much and lose the time, right? Even though I think, okay, right. I want to see the pretty blinking, colors. I understand there's a lot underneath, but that's what today is for, is walking through this. And yeah, I'm impressed, and I like the way that you're setting it up. There's little things that I kind of add, like, okay, I want the IP address, but really that's. That's a small thing compared to how you gonna structure it.
Right.
And so
that's what I like. I really try at every step to be lazy, to make it to where, like, if I'm gonna make something work, and I can see how, I can do it in a way that saves us, a bunch of time 2 or 3 weeks from now or a month from now, then that's a great opportunity to kind of optimize that work. Obviously, if it's like, you got to balance that. Like, if it's like you always like want to make something perfect, just on the off chance that you might want to do something, something different with it in the future. You want to make it, perfectly flexible and designed, but you got to balance that with, like, look at where the opportunities are for, like, well, I know we're going to do the Automator UI, and so let's build the settings to where, like, we can share code between them, and that's going to save us, days or weeks when we come to do the Automator. So.
Right.
And then sharing devices between accounts.
Yeah, that's a big.
But then, if it's something that's like, oh, this might save us a bunch of time in a year, it's like, well, that's not
right.
That's not worth the cost now. So,
right. We don't know what kind of devices that we're going to be putting on in a year.
Right.
So
that, I don't know. That's kind of how I look at it.
Right, and I appreciate that too, because, like, for example, the gaming machines that we potentially be going into, I want those to be able to plug into the automation and see the gaming machine settings and all that. So I want it to be flexible, and that's why I appreciate that kind of forward looking.
But okay, I'll try and keep you more up to date on my progress when I'm working on really big, especially really big stuff like this.
Sure, and I was talking to Jeremy about adding, like, maybe at the top of each file, maybe a comment. We can kind of standardize what we want that to look like, but at the top of each file, just kind of like what this file is and what it does, and how it maybe even an example of how it interacts with another file.
Yeah, we keep talking about starting to use JSDoc, and then I never do it. So I'll go through. Yeah, I'll go through. I'll go through the stuff, the setting stuff, and add some JSDoc, which won't be at the top of the file, but it'll be basically what you're imagining, like what this file does.
Okay.
It won't be at the top of the file just because JSDoc, you put the comments, like, right before the method or the object that you create, but
Right, and then it automatically builds the documentation. Yeah.
Yep.
That's awesome. Okay, very cool. So yeah, let's get settings finished up and move on to thermostat and deadbolt, and then Jeremy, how about so you got the message I said this morning where we need the shipping dock camera is not on HTTPS, so we gotta do the swap on that. Did you get that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, so let's do that. But then I want you to focus on trying to get those settings in the automator, or sorry, the settings in the device. We need those to be able to link up. So everything you've been doing with, because like right now I have a light switch. I want to test it out with my, my different rooms in my house, because I have different rooms that are totally Hughes, set up. And so having that ability to go through the GUI and click on the device and click button center and then select the lights that that would be that's the next step, I think.
Okay, cool.
So that's hopefully Jeremy can.
That's even more fun than the settings stuff. I think the Automator UI is what I've been looking forward to most. But I'll hammer out before I even do that, I'll hammer out but
I'm thinking Jeremy could do I think Jeremy may be able to. That way you can kind of focus on the thermostat and the deadbolt, and Jeremy can do the button center. Or do you think that's going to require a lot?
That's a lot of front end stuff, actually, because it's building the scene and then building up the automation.
Yeah, it's a lot to ask for someone who's new to front end.
Okay.
But we could flip it around and have him do a thermostat card, like a bare bones thermostat card, and the operations for that, so that we're making progress on that, and then I can come behind him and style it.
Right, because you at least know the functions that are going to need to be sent out from the thermostat. Well, actually, I don't know if we're doing functions. Are we going to we're moving to state, right? Just sending the state and not sending it.
Yeah, from the front end. So the client API will still be at least for now, I think will still be kind of traditional,
temperature up, obviously.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah, and those were just mapped to a function on the device, but then the actual data being sent across isn't a function command but a state.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go, because it just gets rid of so much code, and we have to have those state definitions for the automator anyway. Mm-hmm. So we're 80% there. We'll just make a few changes to make all that work.
Okay. All right, yeah, now let's switch it up. Let's finish up settings. Ethan can finish up settings and then start working on adding those features, the feature mappings for the different, I want to call them services, they are services, but we're kind of calling them features on the GUI.
Right.
Device features.
Right.
Well, okay, so what I was thinking about with the front end, I think Jeremy can really easily help with getting all the settings definitions in place and the state definitions.
Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely right for Jeremy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable
on the devices and the relay?
Okay. Do you feel comfortable with that, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And then I guess Ethan, you're just thinking about the React component to that.
Yeah, mostly. There's a couple of changes on the services to get the state working that I'm going to do. It'd probably take me half an hour, but it would take me twice as long to explain it to someone else. So
right, for sure. Okay. All right. Well, that sounds like a plan. Yeah, let me know. And are you going to push to OA2 dev?
I'm working in OA2 device settings on Relay and dev device settings on Gateway. Oh man, I haven't pushed in forever. That's terrifying. If we had a storm and my laptop got knocked out, yeah, I'll push. So I'll push to those branches, and later today or tomorrow.
Okay. Do you want to try to merge to OA2 dev? Because that's what I'm running on dev.python.org.
Yeah, I think we're at that point, because right now we don't have device settings is I branched from device driver, and so I can merge down to device driver and then merge device driver to dev
Okay, cool.
I think it's all at a pretty stable point.
Right, and I'm gonna be doing the swap. I know I've been saying this, but pretty soon I'll be doing the swap from the cameras that are currently on OA1 and pull them over to OA2, and then we'll officially PyPhi.org will be pointing to OA2 will officially become just OA, right?
Okay, before you do that, our build process. Actually, we can't build production yet.
Okay.
I don't have it set up in Webpack. So, I'll need to do that. That'll probably take me a couple of hours, maybe 2 or 3 hours. Otherwise, like right now, we only have the capability to run like the development build of React and like a bunch, different libraries, which is like 10 times slower than the production build.
Okay, Jeremy and I were kind of noticing that too. That whenever we went into Python.org, it loaded a lot quicker than dev.python.org.
Yeah. So the React build, the dev build of React is it's like literally like 10 times slower because it's just got a lot of stuff for development.
Right.
Make development easier. So.
Okay. Well, then that's okay. So then there's kind of 3 important things: finish up settings. That's number 1. Get production ready, and then move on to the services. And then while you're working on the services, I'll be swapping the cameras over to the production, server. And
sounds good.
And then Jeremy, you're working on, I guess the wiring up of the of that services, the automated services on the for the features.
Definitions.
Yeah. So what are we going to call that? How should we describe that? It's not automations, right? That's not, or is that the automations?
Settings definitions and state definitions, right?
Okay. Well, the concept of mapping the features to an action.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, so yeah, it's basically.
It is kind of an automation, right?
It's basically the driver just like creating automations. Each automation has a type property, and the idea there is it kind of goes back to like we can create automations that are more of a back end thing. Like the driver can create automations and just set them to type driver or something like that, and then we won't show those on the front end to the user and like clutter up their list.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, so is there anything else? Any questions, Jeremy, before you start jumping in?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, let me know whenever you're pushing up, and that way I can run my test. And I appreciate you doing this for us, Ethan.
Yeah, of course, my pleasure. And the device driver branch will be a breaking change on gateway and relay.
Okay. All right. So I need to
all the existing devices have to be updated when we push it to dev.
Okay. So then should I update the devices first and then update and then it'll connect up? Or?
It doesn't matter either way you do it. They're not going to work for the time that they're not on the same, or for the span of time that
Right, but I'm thinking. Okay, so in the future though, let's say we have this. Let's say we have 10 cameras out there. Like I'd have to go currently on OA2, and if I want to update, I can reverse tonal. I can tonal into a camera and run the update and do PM2 restart on that. But obviously,
I see.
When I do that, it'll be ready to connect to the new version. But I'll be at that point. That's a scary point, right? Because it's
right.
Yeah,
I would do that because otherwise, if you, with this update, you can't.
We'd be in the situation we are right now, where I have to log back in to do the shipping docs.
Right. Yeah. Well, it'll be even worse with this update because once you update Relay, existing devices will not connect to it anymore. So,
okay.
But after this, all the connection stuff should be stable now.
Okay.
So there shouldn't be any changes like that after this.
Okay. All right. Well,
there might be breaking changes in the future. There shouldn't be any changes that cause a device to not be able to connect anymore.
Right. Because that's going to be super important. The more devices we have, on the system. So okay, and then so Sunday we'll be having people over again. Ethan, if you're available, let me know.
Yeah. I was gonna go. Sorry, I was gonna go this last Sunday. And then what was weird is like you were asking me about Monday, and I had originally sent that message Sunday morning, but then I looked at the timestamp in Hangouts and it was like Sunday evening.
Yeah.
So I tried, apparently like I sent it, but it didn't send it until the end of the day or something.
Right. Yeah, I've been doing that. Really Leah's been doing that too. I think it's an iPhone, Android, or iPhone Hangouts thing or something.
Yeah, maybe.
But okay, but yeah, so we get going usually around 1, and then till whenever, until Jonas starts getting really upset, needs to go to bed. And then okay, yeah, so that, and then fill out your timesheet. I don't know, I haven't looked at your timesheet.
Oh yeah.
But I have the extra spots for you to fill it out. And I think that's about it.
Cool.
All right, Jeremy, is there anything else? You alive?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you, Ethan, and we'll be talking later. Just let me know how when you finish up the settings, when you're going to push.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll push, even if like I said, I'm going to finish today, but if I don't, I'll still push my progress and just let you know like it's not done.
Okay.
I'll finish up tomorrow.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.